I'm Sophie Kinsella.
And I'm Jojo Moyes, and I'm here to talk to Sophie about her new book, Finding Audrey. So, Sophie, tell us about Finding Audrey. What's the plot and who's Audrey?
Well, Finding Audrey is my first ever young adult book, so that's really exciting. And Audrey is a teen protagonist that I've never written a teenager before. She's a funny character, but she's quite vulnerable. She suffers from anxiety disorder, and she's had quite a tough time, actually. She's been bullied, she's had depression, she's actually been treated in hospital before the book begins. And when we join her, she's at home with her family, kind of hiding at home. She hides behind dark glasses, she can't make eye contact with anybody, she can't really deal with people at all. And so the book is her coming out of her shell and rejoining life. It's about Audrey, but I think it's as much about her family. And she has this slightly chaotic family. She's got her brother Frank is 15 and is obsessed by video games, which I think a lot of people will relate to.
I hear you, yep.
Mother, all she's obsessed by is getting Frank off video games.
I hear that one too.
Exactly, yeah. We've been there. And in fact, the mother is quite an obsessive anyway. She reads the Daily Mail. She falls for every craze. So if it's not vitamin D, it's, gluten-free, and now it's, oh my God, get Frank off video games. So that's all kind of going on around Audrey. And as part of Audrey's treatment, she is asked to film her family. And so part of the book is scenes of family life from her family that is sort of supposed to help her engage with people a bit more, just get out there. And so we see this, it's almost like a documentary of her family. And she calls it My Serene and Loving Family.
Slightly ironic.
Well, that was actually my working title for the book. And then I thought, nobody will get that this is ironic. They'll think it's genuinely a serene and loving family. They're loving. I'll give them that.
All the comments saying, I'm sorry,
yes,
it wasn't a very
we didn't notice any serenity.
Actually, one of the things that really shone out for me, yes, it's about social anxiety disorder on one level, but it's also very, very funny. The wit involved in both the parental situation, the mother trying desperately to carve some space between her eldest child, Frank, and his video games, but also the family themselves. Is that something that came very easily to you?
I think I can't help writing comedy, is the truth. So even if I take quite a serious and troubling subject like social anxiety, or indeed video game addiction, which actually is quite a problem, I can't help but find the funny side of it. So it sort of does, if I imagine a scene, I'm always going to look for the joke, and I'm always going to look for human foibles, because I think that we learn so much by laughing at ourselves, and if you can start by laughing at your flaws, then actually you can sort of learn about them and do something about them. Far better to laugh about them than be in denial about them.
But it is a book that has quite a serious undercurrent. It's about bullying on one level. Poor old Audrey, it turns out her social anxiety disorder comes from a very specific place. But was it important to you to have a bit of grit in the oyster? This is not just a funny young adult book. This is something that a lot of children, young people are going to identify with.
To be honest, I always find that with comedy. I think comedy sort of on its own, just the froth, has no meaning. And actually you need the light and the dark. Often comedy is a kind of relief that, you felt this slight angst and now you can all laugh. And I think it's a very human sort of response. And this is in some ways one of the darkest things I've done, because she's in a very troubled place. But she never loses her sense of humour. And I think that's also quite important, that there's a kind of irreverence. And I think that's also quite a teenage thing. Yes, you've had this dreadful stuff happen to you, but you're not going to sort of wallow. You're going to be quite matter of fact. She's quite wry.
No, she has quite a dark sense of humour.
Yeah.
I think it's not a depressing book, but I did feel for her. She has an air of vulnerability that, as a reader and also frankly as a mother, I don't think this book is just a young adult book. I think that if you are a mother with teenage children especially, it has so much resonance. But she is just this character who you slightly want to protect. her pain shines through, if you like. Is that something that you consciously want to connect with young adults? I mean, we read this week that teenagers have never been under such pressure, and there is a huge rise in mental health issues for young people. Is that something that you were thinking about when you wrote it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, mental health is one of those subjects that for a while, nobody talked about, and now we're more and more aware. And the truth is, the more people know about it, the more they might see signs and catch it earlier. And I think to write sort of from the point of view of somebody suffering just helps people sort of understand what's going on. And it is very painful, but it's not the end of the world. And I mean, as her therapist keeps saying to her, this is treatable, this is treatable, you're doing all the right stuff. So, I mean, it is positive. People react in such different ways. Some people say, oh my God, that book, it's so hilarious. And some people go, oh, it's so sad. And I kind of hope it's both.
I think it's both.
It's both. Yeah. But that's life, isn't it? She does something called exposure therapy, which is where you sort of put yourself out there, which I think actually is sort of instinctive anyway. If you're afraid of something, don't run away from it.
Take baby steps towards it.
Just experience it little by little and out you go. But it is quite a personal book for me. And I just hope that anybody who's suffered this kind of thing, I mean, people don't know about it. This is what I learned. And, just reading this, you'll think, oh, there's this, right, I didn't know about that.
Perhaps in the old days, people would just say, oh, she's a bit difficult in company. She struggles a bit in a crowd. Yeah. And actually, when you sit inside Audrey's head, if you like, you can see quite how overwhelming even quite normal social situations can feel if you've gone into that dark place. But what's lovely is that you see her coming out of it
you do.
By steps.
You do. And I think, unless you actually have experienced this, it's quite hard to know what it's like. And people helpfully saying, oh, well, just sort of snap out of it is not really the way to go.
Well, it's interesting, like Marion Key's last book, The Mystery of Mercy Close, that showed me, chick lit gets described as being light and frothy, but that showed me far more about what it would be like to experience serious depression than anything I'd ever read. And likewise, yes, it's a funny book, your book, but I think Audrey will actually resonate with a huge number of young people and perhaps parents who are trying to help their teenagers.
This is what I really hope, actually. I mean, I also think it shows teenagers what it's like to be a parent.
Yes.
Which perhaps they haven't thought about. Why would they? But, what I was trying to do is show that when something quite seismic happens to one member of a family, it affects the whole family. And everybody has to sort of work together, and Audrey's very keen that it's not just about her recovery, but it's about the family recovery. And
there is a lovely passage where she and her brother hack into their parents' email. We're not advising anybody to do this
at home.
But one of the things she's quite shocked by is the degree to which her illness has affected everybody else, because I think when you don't feel very good in yourself, when you're depressed, as she is, your world shrinks to you.
Absolutely.
You become terribly self-conscious. You think that everybody's looking at you, and it comes as quite a shock to her. And Frank says, you've been the focus of the family for ages.
What did you think?
Yeah,
what
exactly.
Did you think? Hello.
But in a way, that's part of her.
Well, I mean, this sort of suffering is all about lacking any proportion.
Yes.
Nothing is in proportion, and that's really the illness. It's a sort of, everything is skewed. So for her, eye contact is terrifying. Now, obviously, this is not, the correct way for the brain to operate, and so everything is sort of, nothing is in the right proportion. Her parents included, and family life included.
So, how did you find the experience? I mean, it's a very joyful book. It's very funny, and what I really felt was that there was a whole family that I totally believed in. You've up to now tended to write about quite individual characters with Becky Bloomwood. How did you find the experience of actually replicating family life? Because to me it felt like you loved it.
I loved it. I loved writing a family, and each member is important. From the 4-year-old to the father to
Felix
all of
with
them.
his joy at ketchup and a long chip, and
and actually talk about the light relief. I mean, he's the light relief for this whole family. I loved them. I felt as if I just dived into their world. I wrote the book actually very quickly. I was
going to ask you about that.
I started it, and it was just total immersion. This is it. I'm now living with Audrey and her family, and I will rejoin the world when I've finished with them. It really was. And I just loved it. I could see each situation from every single point of view. And, you know, everyone's got a point. Everyone has got a take on life, and they all just have to work together. And I think that's, you know, that's what we all do. We live in our families and they work in their different ways.
So do you think you'll revisit them?
I don't know. It's one of those things. I love them so much. I would love to dive back into their lives. But I would only want to do it if I felt it was absolutely right. You know, I mean, well, you'll know. You write a book, and in one way, you just want to spend the rest of your life writing these characters forever because you love them so much. But on the other hand, you know, you only want to write a book if you really got something to say. So that would be my sort of acid test. Do I have something really important now to say about this family?
I think that's what really shone through. I mean, my great adage when writing is you have to write what's at the front of your head. You have to write the thing that you feel passionately about. For me, there were two twin issues in this book, the social anxiety and the computer gaming and its effect on family life that really, really shone through. It's hard to see unless you put Audrey through anher set of tests where you would go with it. But you know, you are the master of the sequel.
Well,
so
who knows? I mean, it's interesting, because with most of my sort of standalone books, I've said, well, that's it. I've told their story, and then with the shopaholic books, I've just gone. And so I'm finely balanced at the moment. I don't know.
So what made you want to write a young adult novel?
Well, it wasn't like I thought, oh, I know, I'll write a young adult novel. I wanted to tell Audrey's story and Frank's story, and they are young adults, and it just seemed that this was the right kind of genre to put them in. And it was quite fun thinking, okay, this is a fresh challenge, this is something new, I've written all these adult books, now I'm going to write something pitched at teenagers, about teenagers, that I really hope they will relate to. The teenage world is really direct and invigorating, and it's just quite intense.
Much more fun than people
It's a great time of life, and you know, a teenage romance. I mean,
it's so fresh,
so magical, and every tiny little moment means so much. And so actually, when I got the idea for doing it, I actually got really excited. I thought, oh my God, this is a whole new area of writing, but in just a slightly different way.
Partway through the book, you realise that bullying has been the cause of a lot of Audrey's problems. What prompted you to write about bullying?
Well, I think the sad truth is that bullying is just part of a lot of teenagers' experience. And I think it's a really devastating sort of thing to happen. I mean, you know, there's a spectrum, of course. There's sort of just a bit of name calling and being picked on to something quite extreme, which is what happens in the book. Although
you're not specific about exactly what happens, and that's almost worse because the reader's imagination goes into overdrive.
I was very keen not to spell out what happened to Audrey because I think that. I'm a great believer in less is more, and I think I don't want any reader to sort of try and map their own experience onto Audrey's and think, well, mine was the same, mine was different, yours was worse. I just want anybody who's suffered like she has to be able to identify.
It's such a powerful message when you can say to a teenager, you are not alone. And I think one of the things that does strike you about Audrey's experience is the pervasive nature of bullying now, is that it doesn't stop at the school gate.
Well, she becomes slightly phone phobic, and that's because that's where a lot of this stuff goes on your screens. And you're right, you can't escape. Your home used to be your refuge. And now it's not. So Jojo, thank you so much. That was such a fun interview.
It was absolutely my pleasure.